Greg Meszaros, Austin Water Director.
Greg, this has gone through at least a couple of iterations. The first version of objections to this proposal we heard from the environmental community seemed to be based on the misapprehension that this golf course was going to be using potable water, which, as I understand it, was never really on the table, that we're not going to try and take potable water. They're always trying to get reclaimed water. Then I started asking, well, okay, so if you have your reclaimed water or some other source that's not potable water, is that a problem for you? And I hadn't really thought it through until that moment. I wonder if you could help me think this through. I understand potable water is something which is exceptionally scarce right now, and any additional potable water we use for a golf course or any other purpose is just another 1 million gallons we can't use for people's drinking purposes, for other things which you gotta have potable water for. Is there something similar going on with reclaimed water? If we use reclaimed water for purposes of irrigating a golf course, is there something we're giving up by using it for purposes of a golf course? And help me think that through.
Yes, we've been working on this transaction with the Parks Department and the developer and trying to reconcile some of the risks the project represents, particularly in this drought period that we're in. And my comments are really not going to be based on the merits of the golf course, but more on risks to our efforts to stabilize the water supply and protect it through what is a very bad drought that may continue for well into the future. As the council probably recalls, you impaneled a water resource task force this summer, and working collaboratively with the utility, we identified some short and midterm projects to help with water supply. The Decker Lake project concepts had the highest value short-term to medium-term water supply of all the projects that we identified. It is the most rapid emergency water supply that we could deploy through this drought. And we're just beginning the feasibility of that project and how we might employ Decker Lake for its best purposes for water supply. And the kind of things that we're evaluating is how we'd use that off-channel reservoir, how it might even ultimately one day be pumped directly into our water plants for treatment. We want to evaluate how we could keep the lake filled. If we drain it down, how it could refill. We wanted to evaluate how we might use well water surrounding the lake as a potential source of water supply, how reuse might help refill the lake. And the golf course complicates those matters, quite honestly. We just don't know how we may use those things. The golf course has talked about using wells themselves. They've talked about using reclaimed water. We would like to optimize the reclaimed water to complement the water supply in this area, as opposed to trying to get a $13 to $15 million project off the ground to bring reclaimed water to the golf course as the primary initial purpose. We're just trying to balance all those risks. We're also looking, even beyond Decker Lake, we're looking for opportunities to do things like aquifer storage and recovery, where we would pump reclaimed water into the ground, let it get a natural treatment, and then pull it out later. And I think those are future uses of reclaimed water, and even potentially land in and around this particular lake might be good for aquifer storage and recovery. And we just don't know how a large development like the golf course may inhibit some of those uses. Beyond Decker as a water supply strategy, we have been investing a lot of time in working with LCRA and downstream interests to cut off flows with this drought. As a matter of fact, just this week, LCRA's board voted for the 4th year in a row to cut off all downstream rice water. There is high emotions with these matters. Our long-term water management plan, or LCRA's long-term water management plan, that is right now before the commission, the TCQ, that would permanently built in the risk protection to curtail downstream rice flows, is being considered. And again, there's high emotions there. One of the things that I certainly discuss often is our credibility in terms of being an early adopter of conservation, being very cautious with how we use water. That has helped us immeasurably develop this water management plan in a way that is really revolutionary in terms of the way it's proposed to change how water is kept in the lakes to protect our firm water supply. And I think again, this is probably more opinion than anything on my part, but my experiences there is that I think a large golf course development that would use reclaimed water that may be able to normally return back to the river system proposes some risks to upset the delicate balance of these water management plan revisions. I mean, I'll just give you another example. If the lakes fall below 600,000 acre-feet of storage, which we're just a little bit above that emergency level, they're going to implement pro rata curtailment. And that's not just on firm water. That's going to be on bay and estuary flows. Every year, about 33,000 acre-feet of water flows down out of the Highland Lakes to maintain bays and estuary health. They're going to cut that by at least 20% and maybe more as the lakes would continue to fall. That's going to bring a lot of intensity on our reuse program because every drop of water that we're pulling out of the river is going to be that more valuable under that curtailment regime where bays and estuary flows aren't getting as much water. And I think we'll get a lot of attention, and that might be on about the same time where we're trying to get additional reuse water to a large golf course on city property. And I think I'm the water guy, so I'm worried about water. You know, as they said at lunch, I pull my hair out.
I did say that.
Yeah. You know, I'm trying to give you some of the risk. You know, they may not be insurmountable risks, but I think the council maybe should consider all the factors when we're doing this. Again, I'm not judging the project. I'm just kind of giving you the water side.
Well, what you're telling me, you're using a lot of words like this complicates things. We're not sure what the final results of this would be. This may hurt our credibility with LCRA, which are not incontrovertible facts, but they're very useful opinions, it seems to me, in a very complicated, very almost a murky situation we find ourselves in as we get further and further into this drought, and it's less and less clear. So what's going to happen next? That kind of opinion is valuable to me. It doesn't mean that we can't do this. It does mean, however, that we're taking all sorts of risks we don't fully understand if we do. Is that a fair characterization?
I think that's a fair characterization, that there's a lot of things we're balancing now, and you know, this drought is grave. I mean, it is a grave drought. The last 4 years have been the lowest ever, 4 years by far, of inflows into the lakes. Again, we're hovering just about emergency levels. The El Nino pattern that was supposed to form is weakening. It's sputtering. It may or may not form. It may or may not bring water. I sure hope the drought breaks and the lakes refill and you know, we take a step back from the brink.
Your life becomes easier. Yeah,
but we just don't know. And even if that happens, I think with climate change pressures, the history of this drought, that these issues aren't going away. And you know, so we're just trying to reconcile all of that with regards to things like this golf course being you know, kind of wrapped around the primary emergency water supply source that we had identified through the summer deliberations.
Is this the sort of thing which you could? Right now, it looks extremely uncertain. Would it make sense, from your point of view, to continue working on this issue to figure out if there's some way where, for example, a golf course could get 1 million gallons without materially hurting our credibility or hurting downstream flows to the estuaries and bays and things like that? Or is it just plain kind of a dead cert from your point of view, it's just going to hurt us and we should say no?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I think it's a good policy question to
I'll ask my class tomorrow morning and see what they think.
You know, I don't know. It's hard for me to make a broad judgment like that. I'm clearly anxious about these matters, and I think we've communicated that internally as well as in some of our discussions with the developer. I mean, they're working hard to try to address risk. I've seen that in them, and I mean, even today I heard some concepts I heard before, like this water neutrality, that they would work to reduce water at other golf courses, and you know, and so I mean, I hadn't heard that before, and certainly anything that we could do like that helps manage some of these risks that I'm speaking of. But I mean, I just have to. I don't know. It's hard to say what would happen. I do know, this is by far the worst drought we've ever faced, and I'm pretty risk averse in that regard.
I think we all are. Thank you, Greg.
Mayor.
I have one quick question. Would you, by the same token, be opposed to any new people, any population increase within your CCN, or any new business that use water within your CCN?
Are you asking me if I'm opposed to that?
Yes.
No, I'm not opposed.
Okay. And I would only say, I understand your trepidation, but you haven't been around here that long. The lake levels were much worse back in the 50s and 60s than they are now.
Mayor, I'd probably respectfully disagree with that, but
Well, it's a fact. It's a fact.
If there
It's
was
not something to argue, disagree, or it's just a fact.
I would say the inflows we're experiencing in this drought are considerably
I
worse
didn't
than
say
the
the
drought of the
inflows,
50s.
Mr.
Okay. I don't want to argue, Mayor.
Okay, good. I don't want to argue with you either.
I have a question,
Mayor Pro Tem.
Greg, you talked, you said some pretty weighty stuff here at the 9th hour, so I want to just make sure I got it. You said that this project would be inconsistent with our water management plan as it exists right now. Can you expand upon that?
Well, let me clarify. The LCRA has a water management plan, and it governs how water is released out of the Highland Lakes for downstream users. The water management plan has undergone significant revisions, and it is proposed, and it's before the TCEQ in the months ahead, to radically limit the amount of water that downstream interruptible customers would get.
Okay.
It's gone through really a transformation in that regard. That's good for us. That demonstrates that the more water will stay in the lake, and LCRA and TCEQ hopefully will support a significant long-term permanent reductions to downstream rice water, which is going to be very controversial for downstream rice interest and others that are downstream of Austin. That has been about a 5-year effort to get to this point of that revision, and literally tens of thousands of hours of work by Austin and other stakeholders in the process. I'm just concerned that if Austin looks insensitive to the drought, that good work could be complicated as we're getting to the discussions with TCEQ. I don't know that, in fact, but there's many downstream interests that will oppose that water management plan. We'll be in a contested case hearing. It may go to the courts. I just don't know how a new golf course on city property in the middle of this drought with these low inflows and this big revision, how that would play out. It's a variable, and it's a variable that I think potentially could come into play.
And so you heard the developer talk a little bit about water neutrality, and that stuck with you for some reason. Can you explain what that would do? Would that be less water for some reason? Is that a new concept that would help if we took that to the LCRA, if we did end up in some kind of battle like this? Or?
Well, yes, certainly that's a better story. That a development, a golf course, because I think some folks, say, golf course is like an optional use. And if you're doing a recreational use in the middle of the drought and you can demonstrate that you've offset all the water for that by optimizing the water use at other golf courses, and that's a clear factual presentation, I think that's certainly a stronger story than, we built a golf course and are using more water, whatever water would be, reclaimed water or those kind of considerations.
But you haven't worked on any plan like that with the Parks Department and the developer?
Well, no, the first of I heard today that they were proposing this to be a water neutral development. It's, to the best of my knowledge, that language isn't in the contract. I hadn't seen it, I guess, in the proposed contract. Today was the first time I heard that. So that's, certainly the kind of concepts that we would encourage them to pursue. And they have been, fair-minded in terms of their talk about how this golf course would be more water sensitive in terms of its plantings and where they would irrigate. And so, we're hopeful that obviously they would stay with those kind of options. Typically, I've been a director now for 7 years. You probably don't hear me standing up here opposing development and investment very often. And I think it might be reflective of the risk that I see this drought. Again, maybe I'm just a little paranoid about it, but it's challenging for us.
No,
right
you're here
now.
to level with us, and that's what we want you to do. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor.
Councilman Martinez.
Mr. Meszaros, I wanted to continue down a similar line of questioning. So if we run into a risk by approving this project, but let's just say any project, if our goal moving forward is to increase reuse and gray water use as much as possible as a means of conservation, wouldn't we be in the same trouble or predicament with LCRA, whether it was 1,000 rooftops that were in a water neutral subdivision, which is where we're moving forward towards as a policy? We've said, you know, we want to create neighborhoods that conserve as much electricity and water as possible. Wouldn't we be in the same, aren't we going to head to the same point if this drought continues, regardless of whether we approve this project or not? And if our goal is to increase gray water use, where else would it be better to use it than on golf courses? And aren't our current golf courses using gray water? And isn't that the direction we're headed as a city, is to get every city golf course on gray water?
I would answer in a couple ways. One, I think you make a good point that downstream interest, others that are opposed to curtailing water, saving water for water customers like Austin, that they're going to criticize Austin irrespective of this golf course. I think that, you know, the golf course issue, though, you know, raises some issues. One council member, we have almost exclusively focused our reclaimed program on converting existing uses off of potable onto reclaim, as opposed to, like with the golf courses, we've taken existing golf courses and flipped them from potable use to reclaimed use. This is the first major transaction where we're taking reclaimed water and facilitating a brand new development, for lack of a better way to put it. So it's a little different animal in that regard. And I just would put that out for you.
But wouldn't it be the same if we were doing this for a new subdivision with thousands of homes and putting purple pipe through that subdivision? Wouldn't it be the same scenario? It's not about what development is on top of the ground. It's about the purple pipe under the ground and using that water as opposed to putting it back in the river.
Yes, exactly right. If we have reclaimed water happening in other areas, that's brand new. I think you face those same issues. Probably the double whammy here is a large water use for a recreational purpose happening right in the middle of the drought, also wrapped around the best project we identified for emergency water supply. That's where my anxiety goes up. It isn't either one of those issues. It's those two things lined up, that the location of this golf course being around the number one project we've identified for emergency water supply, and it being a large reuse recreational purpose. That's probably the alignment that, you know, is the kind of stacking this up for us. You know, if you all approve it, we're going to execute this. We're not going to drag our feet. We're going to do the best we can to make this happen in a way that manages all these risks. And again, I'm just trying to put them on the table for you.
And I appreciate that. And I know you're in a tough spot. You have to give us the most conservative advice that you can based on the current conditions that we're facing and what you see as a potential condition in the future. And right now, it doesn't look so bright. It doesn't look like we're going to get the rain this winter that we thought we might get. You know, for me, some of the most, I guess, compelling testimony is actually from the community that resides in and around that area. And, you know, I can't overlook statements like, we got a tank farm in our area, and we have a landfill in our area, and we have, you know, a prison in our neighborhood. Why can't we get something that, you know, that they actually come down here and ask us to help them improve their neighborhood? We have some incredible planning going on along Loyola Lane with Colony Loop Park, and I want to see all of that happen, but I'm just in a tough spot here because I believe what they're telling me, those neighbors saying, you know, we've been neglected for quite some time, and maybe this isn't the panacea of what that neighborhood needs, but they don't have anything out there right now to hear them tell the story. I'm not putting words in their mouth. And so if this does induce a hotel and restaurants and ancillary economic benefits, I think that's what they're fighting for, is what I'm hearing. And so that's the predicament I'm in. I wish we had some more assurances as to this water neutrality that was brought up today. I don't know what that looks like or what that means. I certainly know what it means to have a grass that is drought resistant. I certainly understood what Mr. Ogilvie meant when he said, this is not going to be some lush, thick, carpeted green country club. It's Mother Nature's either going to make it green or make it brown. I appreciate those comments. I think what I'm looking for and what I'm hearing on the dais is just at every assurance that we can get on using potable water that is obviously one of our most scarce resources right now. And I don't know how to get that assurances, and I'm trying to ask you to help me understand that and help.
Well, first, I appreciate you being in a tough spot because I feel the same way. Maybe, I'll throw out a couple of thoughts. Well, what you described, Councilmember, and the worthiness of this project and the catalyst effect and the need for investment in this part of our community, I think those are all, very strong. I would offer, I don't know if you'd consider this of value, but with the water utilities' interest in Decker Lake as a potential emergency water supply, we routinely work with the Parks Department, and I think there's an opportunity. We have to work with City Manager's office and Parks Department for the water utility to supply a lot of funding in this area for the Parks Department. That it is routine for us to engage in partnerships with the Parks Department, particularly if we work to use this property and this lake to supplement our water supply and help us through droughts of now and into the future. I think there's a great opportunity for the Water Utility Department with the parks and create a long-term revenue stream for them to invest in this park and to see this park develop for the community in this area. Our finances are a little weak right now, but we're going to get stronger in the future. We've had the assistance of the council to help us with our rates. I think we could structure a transaction where we could grow a revenue stream that would be, a boon for the Parks Department, and this facility would be a good part of our emergency water supply planning. Maybe the golf course is a part of that too. I just think there are opportunities here to get at some of the concerns that you're weighing. And no matter what happens, if this golf course goes forward, we'll work with Parks and with the developer and get data and see that this is as wise a water use as we can. And hopefully they'll live up to their commitments and their promises. They certainly seem sincere in that. And I haven't seen anything to doubt them. And I think this would be perhaps a model golf course from a water use perspective.
I just see the risks that we're heading for. We're already heading down that path. The risk that we're going to run with downstream environmental flows and with reuse is we're there. We're there today. If we don't replenish the Highland Lakes in short order, we're going to be having that conversation regardless. And if there is no financial risk to the city, which is part of the questions I asked earlier, and if it's something that the adjacent neighbors truly want to see if it can be a spark for inducement of some opportunities in their areas, I think I'm trying to weigh that, balance all of that and weigh that decision as well.
Understood.
Mayor? I certainly heard the testimony loud and clear of the neighbors, and I lived in this neighborhood for quite some time myself, and I know the lack of services. And I appreciate the work that the community has done to point out the water issue, Greg, and I'm glad you're standing tall today and explaining the intricacies of it and the difficulties with it. So I'm going to make a motion to postpone this item to the last council meeting in February and give direction that Greg, you and Sarah work with the developer and the community on the water issues and make a recommendation to council about them, because we know we're in a drought and we know that we have a very dicey relationship with LCRA, and we have to be very careful of that. And I think we just need to take the time to make sure that we're making a wise decision not only for this neighborhood, but for the entire city.
That's a motion by the Mayor Pro Tem to postpone until December 11th, second by
No,
Councilmember.
that was mid-February,
Till mid-February?
yeah.
I believe
don't
that
know
would
what
be
date that
February
is.
26th, Mayor, but I'll defer to somebody with a real calendar in front of them.
That's a second by Councilmember Spellman for postponement till
Yeah, mine said 24th.
a meeting in February, which we'll nail down. Let me just say, I'm not going to support the motion to postpone. I think the case has been made. This is a wonderful opportunity for the entire city of Austin, especially for the folks who live in that area. It is truly looking a gift horse in the mouth. And I don't want to be too critical, Mr. Meszaros, but I think your attitude towards this has been counter to the interests of the city of Austin. You want to? Councilmember Morrison.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to support this motion. I want to throw out some more questions and you don't necessarily have to answer them now, but I think that in the ensuing weeks to make sure that they're also considered. One is, I would be interested to know and want to make sure it's in the conversation for the new council. If we build the reclaimed water system to go there, where does that money come from, and what does it take? What will we not be doing if we spend our money on that? Because I presume we have a reclaim CIP budget. Is that correct? Am I thinking correctly
We would
here?
provide you more specifics, but in general terms, we would build a large reclaimed transmission line, and we do have a master plan that a transmission line for reclaimed water would go through this area, and for the Decker Lake water supply, we'd probably think of that. But then we would oversize that line and also work to get it to the golf course development. What we envision and what I believe is in the contract language is that we would work with the developer on their specifications for how much water they need and when they need it, and then they would go through the service extension request process and pay a proportion of the water line or the reclaim line that we would bring out to this property. They would participate in funding a portion of that. That's what we're envisioning. Alternatively, they have explored that they want to evaluate potentially using well water on the site, and that might be another option that they would come back, and I believe that has to come back to the council to explore the use of an alternative water source like well water. But if we did reclaim water and we sized it extra big for them, then they would pay a proportion of that.
I guess what I'm envisioning is we only have so much money for building reclaimed water, and we have a schedule for building our reclaimed water system, and this would shift the schedule to something.
Yeah, we'd have to really accelerate. This would be probably a $13 to $15 million project, and we'd have to get it there. They've been talking about a PGA event, I think, in 2017. So this would be a full court press for us to match that schedule for them.
And what would we not do instead? See, I guess what I'm getting at is if we had plans already to build some part of a reclaimed water system with that, $10 million, $20 million to go take some existing potable water uses off. So we would backtrack there. I just think we need to understand what the trade-off is in terms of timing, and for that amount of time, that system wouldn't be in place that is currently planned.
I understand. We could give you some feedback on it.
Okay, yeah, and it's not going to be me. You're going to be giving
that's
some other people feedback, and so I appreciate that. Let's see, I guess, I'm going to support this because what it sounds like to me is that we're potentially closing off options. We're potentially putting a target on our back, and all of that needs to be discussed a lot more because that's not going to be a good thing. The whole issue of amenities and quality of life issues for that area of town, I went back and looked at our 2012 bond and our 2006 bond, Parks bonds, and I didn't see anything on those for Walter E. Long. And I wonder if I could have somebody from Parks I didn't go back any farther, but like, why have we not been investing our bond money and putting bond projects in that area of town? And in that park, I mean, you know, here's the thing. I'm going to let you finish in just a minute, but what I want to say is we often hear we need to have a plan so that when we can look at funding sources, we'll be a step ahead. And we have a plan. We've had a plan since '68, and it sounds like very little money has gone into the plan.
Sarah Hensley, Director of Parks and Recreation. We asked for money. We did not receive it in the bonds. Both times we requested dollars in the bond program, but we did not receive those dollars. It was cut through the bond council and having to squash it down.
Okay, so the Parks Department has been
Yes, ma'am.
putting it on the list when it goes to the, you
Yes,
said the
ma'am.
bond council, you're talking about the committees that we put together.
Yes, ma'am.
So that by the time it has gotten to the council, Walter Long has been off the table.
Taken off the list.
Okay, because my thought is, you know, that seems to be there's a drive, we want something, this is something that we can have now, and that there's a drive to support it because of that, but we have to look back as to how we even got here and what our options are in terms of correcting that.
No, that, absolutely.
Thank you.
But here we have the opportunity basically to have a park for free, because it's not just 2 golf courses. It's a lot of passive use park space. We don't have to ask the citizens for bonds. This is being provided as a part of this package at no cost to the city, at no cost to the taxpayers. And by the way, if we were to vote bonds to build a park near Decker Lake, wouldn't we have to use water on it?
I think we would.
I think we would. I'd like to ask Mr. Settle how this delay until February would affect this project.
Well, I don't honestly know, Mayor. I would ask that give us the opportunity to come back at your last meeting in December for at least a status report and possible action. One of the reasons is we've been in this process a long time. We went through a lengthy RFQ process. We have pro forma'd a lot of this based on a certain time frame. We also have things in the mill that you heard talk about. The PGA is looking at Austin. If they see that we're getting pushed out now another 3 or 4 months, that could affect that, which could affect the viability of this whole project. I don't know if there's any harm in coming back December 11th. Let us work with Mr. Meszaros and his group. I thought we had cleared this up, frankly. I had a talk with Mr. Meszaros. I thought we put exactly what he asked for in the contract, and I'm quite shocked that we're blindsided tonight, by the way, by Mr. Meszaros' report, but we still want to work with him. I would ask that you try to give us until December 11th, put it back on the agenda. If we don't have an answer for you, then kill it off. But it would be helpful to be able to come back then and at least give us a shot. These poor guys have been in the process for a while, and I don't know that you have anything to lose by bringing it back in December. Thanks.
So I would offer a friendly amendment that we come back, that we postpone until December the 11th instead of February next year, just to see if any progress has been made.
We're going to close the public hearing,
And well, it's not a public hearing,
I mean-
but we cut off public comment.
cut off public comment,
Yes.
and we just receive a report from staff.
Right.
Okay.
Is that acceptable to you?
What do you want to do?
But potential action, it's not just receive the report, but it's receive the report and potential action.
If I might, Mayor, I don't have a substantial enough objection to doing that I would say no, but I do want to say 2 things. First, that it would be lovely for the Parks Department to be able to monetize this unused property of 750 acres and be able to get $400,000 a year in value out of it, which could be used in parks, for park activities throughout the rest of the system. And that's what I see as, and I've always seen as being the great value of this, is not another golf course, because frankly, I don't play golf, and I don't watch golf on TV. I'm alive, but my apologies, guys, I couldn't resist. But because I think that it is a valuable thing for us to take this fallow land that has been fallow for 50 years and actually find some use for it, which the Parks Department can actually use. That's a good thing. I'm for that. But if there are substantial risks with respect to one of the biggest single problems that we're dealing with right now as a council and as a city, whether it's the worst drought or the second worst drought in recorded history is less important to me than it is a serious drought. And we got 1 million people knocking on our door trying to come to town wanting more and more water, and we have a tremendous shortage of water to give them. It seems to me that we need to be very careful to make sure that we have a good bridge with the LCRA, who has to be our partner, has to have our back and be with us on this stuff, and that we've done everything we reasonably can in order to take care of our very scarce water supplies. It's conceivable to me that there is a solution to this problem which can be arrived at in 3 weeks. And I have no objection to seeing what it is that our water department, our parks department, and the applicants can do to come up with something which we can all live with in the next 3 weeks. But I find it extremely unlikely that's going to happen, and I suspect what's going to happen in 3 weeks after we hear from these 3 guys is there's going to be more work to do, and we're still going to have to put it off until February. So, Mayor, I accept your suggestion, but I have grave doubts as to whether that's going to be the end of the matter.
Councilor Tovo, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I do. I would have supported the motion to talk about this again in February or to delay it until February. One of the other things that I heard as I attended the public meeting on Monday, I think it's great that the park staff and others were able to organize those public sessions. And there was clearly a lot of dialogue going on at the individual tables, but I did hear from multiple people that they would like an opportunity to talk as a group. It was structured in such a way that individuals could go up to the presentation, to the presenters and talk and ask questions of staff and ask questions of other parties, but I think there would be enormous benefit to having a dialogue take place, a real public discussion take place with all of the stakeholders conversing with one another. And so that would be another argument in my providing some more time on what is a very big decision that lies ahead about a large tract of land. I would also just ask that our staff consider this from a few other angles. One would be the revenue projections. One individual who wrote suggested that we ought to consider in terms of the revenue projections and the rounds of golf, how that might impact our other golf courses, our other municipally owned golf courses. And I know we had a lot of discussion at our first public hearing about the golfers who would be attracted to this particular golf course, and they may not be drawing golfers away from other courses, but I would like for our golf advisory committee and our PARD staff to give that some thought. Are we going to be increasing our revenue in that golf enterprise fund, or are we just drawing some golfers away from other golf courses? And I would also like to ask that our watershed protection staff be involved in this discussion as well. Since there are wetlands involved, it's my understanding, my staff have had an opportunity to talk to some environmental review staff in watershed protection, and I'd like them to explore whether if this proposal goes forward, whether there's a need for a buffer around the lake, because it is a critical water quality zone, establishing a critical water quality zone, and I believe that any contract that this council or a future council considers should really have more explicit provisions about integrated pest management, an integrated pest management plan, and other important provisions. So I will say I really pay a lot of attention to Director Hensley's comments about the real stress of trying to develop this park without funds, and I applaud her willingness and the willingness of other staff to consider options for doing that. I do believe that this area needs and deserves a really fine park and ought to have had it long ago. I am not at all convinced that this is the best way to achieve that, though, and that this is the only option for achieving that. And I just want to thank our water utility staff. You were asked some very direct questions, and you answered them with the expertise that comes from your years of work in this area. And it's, we rely on you to provide us with accurate information and with your cautions when they're warranted. And I appreciate you standing up here and doing that tonight, even though your answers were not popular among some of my colleagues. I appreciate your willingness to do that.
Councilor Martinez.
Mr. Meszaros, my mom taught me as a little kid, don't ever apologize for another man's ill-fated actions. So I'm not going to start tonight, but I'm going to apologize to you for the lack of respect and decorum that was shown to you. You have been through some of the most difficult times with this council, starting with Water Treatment Plant 4 and leading up to tonight, and you have been nothing but professional, straightforward, honest, and respectful each and every time we've asked you a question. So I apologize.
All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. That passes on a vote of 7-0.